Okay, so number 3 is y equals 6 sine 1/4 x. 6 sine 1/4 x. So they want me to graph this one. Want me to graph it? Okay. How are we going to do it? Well, you know what they're going to ask you, what's the amplitude? That's the 6. That's the number in the front. That's how high goes up to positive 6, down to negative 6 when we graph it, right? That's the top and the bottom, 6 and negative 6. Now, what about that 1/4 thing there? What's that going to do? You know?
Is it the height or width and the distance it goes?
Yeah, it has to do, so the height is the 6. So the 1/4 won't have anything to do with height. That's the 6. The 1/4 will affect the period, is what it'll do. Now, how exactly? Well, I'm going to give you a formula for that. The period is equal to 2 pi over b. 2 pi over b. Now, what do I mean b? B is this number here. So in other words, I'm going to say, here's the general equation for sine. It's a sine bx plus c. So I'm just going to write out like a general template. A sine bx plus c. So the A is the number in the front, that's amplitude. The B is the number multiplied by x, that's the 1/4. The C is the number added. We don't have a C, and the C is 0 on ours, right? We don't have a C for now. We won't do that until next week. So the period is 2 pi over B, so it's 2 pi over 1/4. Right, this is the B, 1/4. So it's 2 pi, the period, the width of one cycle, is 2 pi over 1/4. Now, what do I do with 2 pi over 1/4? How do you, that's weird looking. How do I figure that out? You all know, right? What do you do with 2 pi over 1/4? You flip, right, because dividing is upside down multiplying, huh? You take the 1 in the bottom and you flip it upside down and make it times, right? You bring it up here, make it 4 over 1, because dividing is upside down multiplying. So it's 2 pi times 4 over 1, it's 8 pi, isn't it? So the period is 8 pi. What does that mean? That means for this sine curve, it's going to start at 0. It's going to go way up and way down. How high is it going to go? 6. And down to negative 6. And it's going to do all that by what? It's going to go from 0 to 2 pi? No, not 2 pi. That's not its period. That's not the width of one cycle. What's the width of one cycle? What's the period? 8 pi. It'll do that between 0 and 8 pi. And then it'll just repeat, repeat, repeat both directions forever. Yeah?
How do you know where the middle part is?
The middle?
Yeah.
So it's the middle. So what's the middle of 8 pi? 4 pi. Just divide by 2. Is that making sense on that? So one more time. So amplitude is whatever number in front, that's amplitude. And whatever number is multiplied by the x, you call that b. In our case, that's 1/4. And the period, this is what you'll, for exam 2 in a couple weeks, you'll put the formula for period 2 pi over b. And so the b is 2 pi over 1/4. And then you flip that up, 2 pi times 4, 8 pi. So the period's 8 pi, and the period is the width of one cycle. You know, it goes high, goes low. That's one cycle. 8 pi. So between 0 and 8 pi, it does one cycle. And then you'll put that into the grapher thing, and it'll graph. You just make the period 8 pi, and it graphs it for you automatically. What I'm more concerned about is getting you ready for the exam 2. Exam 2, we're not going to have a grapher program. We're just going to have the multiple choice answers. So this is the main thing you got to be able to do for exam number 2 is recognize the graph that goes from 0 to 8 pi is the right one. Making sense? Good. So let's try this one, and then we'll take our test. So start with the amplitude. They're always going to ask you for the amplitude, and they will also ask you for the period. So they'll ask you 2 questions, and then they want you to graph it. So find the amplitude, find the period. Oh, by the way, amplitude, they only want the positive. Even though, it's really -5, they don't want you to say negative. It's just one of those dumb conventions, like how we don't say negative distances, right? You don't say, I went down to LA, it was negative 200 miles. Because it was south. We don't say that. Distance, we just always give positive. That's how they are with amplitude. They just mean how much. So you just say 5. So find the period. Find that period. So the period is 2 pi over b, right? And what's b? Yeah, it's that whole 4 pi. It's the number next to x, multiplied by x, isn't it? That's always the b. So bring that down here. That goes down there, right? 2 pi over b. And so when we simplify that, the pi's cancel. You just get 2/4, which is a half, huh? So the period, so the amplitude is 5. The period's a half. Let's go to the graph. Can you graph that real quick? So just, you can just draw a sine curve without any numbers at first. It's always going to be a sine curve, Goes high, goes low. And then put down the amplitude, put down the period. So how high will it go? How low will it go? 5 and -5, because that's the amplitude. And it starts at 0. And where's it going to end? Not 2 pi, but a half. Doesn't even have a pi in it, huh? It's just half. Because that is the period. So between 0 and a half, it'll do one cycle where it goes up to 5, down to -5. But there's one mistake on that. And I bet some of you know it, huh? There's only one tiny little thing that's basically it. But there's one tiny little thing. I got to do something about the fact that that's actually -5, not +5. What's that do to a graph? Anybody know when you put a negative in the front of a graph? Flips it vertically. Yeah, it'll flip it upside down. So it'll actually go down first and then up. Yeah, so
basically your line is just reversed.
yeah, it's a vertical flip. That negative sign will make a vertical flip. So then you got to go, not up first, then down. But down first, then up. Yeah, it just turns the sine curve upside down. It just flips it vertically. It goes down first. So whatever sign's in the front, negatives in the front is going to go down first. Positives in the front is going to go up first. It's still going to do both, right? It always goes down and up. So this one will go down and up, down and up, down and up forever. So now it's 100% correct. Is that making sense on that? We're rolling. We can do one more. So here, let me draw in one cycle if that make it easier for you to see. So here's where it starts at 0. Here's where it ends, 0.5. There's one cycle, goes down first, then up. See how it's going up to a height of 5, down to depth of -5. And it goes down first, then up. Does one cycle by 0.5, half, and then just repeats forever, left and right. So would you be able to recognize that in a multiple choice test? They have 4 different A, B, C, D. And it's a little confusing when there's like a whole bunch of them, but you just got to hone in on the one cycle, huh? Figure out the one cycle thing on that. Good.
What is it half of, though?
That's a radian angle. 0.5 is actually a good question. These are angles. The x-axis is angles. So 0.5, I know we're used to just thinking, wait a minute, it's only radian if it has pi, but that's not true, huh? You can be radian without having a pi. That's a radian angle. 0.5 is a radian angle.
I'm like looking because the y-axis, it's like if you look at the increments of 2.
Right.
Put it vertical.
Yeah, they made the x-axis spread out a lot more, didn't they? Mm-hmm. They made 2 way over here. Yeah, they can do whatever they want with the axes on graphs. That's just generally okay to do. But yeah, what the x-axis is, that's a good question. Those are angles. That means at what angle is the sine at certain heights. And these numbers are actually radian angles is what they are. What do I mean? Like, how's 0.5 an angle? Like, how much of an opening? Let's just, we only got 2 minutes, so let's just go with this and then we'll take our test. So 0.5, how would you even feel like how much of an opening that is? Well, think about what's our bridge between the two worlds, degrees and radians. Pi is 180 degrees. Pi radians, huh? Okay. Well, pi, how big is pi? What's the number? 3.14, right?
Oh.
Right? So think that way with me for a minute. I know we don't know them, but we'll need to start thinking this way a little bit more. Pi is 3, about 3. So that means 3 radians is like 180. Well, okay, well then what is 1? What's 1 radian?
30 degrees.
About 1/3, so it'd be about 60. Right? Because if I just divided both sides by 3, about. See what I just did there? If you divide them both by 3, it's about 1, it's about 6. I'm just roughly estimating. So the number 1, so like right here is about 60 degrees. This is number 1. So then 0.5 is close to 30. That makes sense? Just to give you a feel. It's just about like that. You know?
That makes more sense.
Yeah, just set it in reality there for you. Yeah, all right.